William Butler Yeats is widely acknowledged as the greatest poet of the 20th century. He belonged to the Protestant Anglo-Irish minority that controlled the economic, political, social, and cultural life of Ireland since the end of the 17th century. Yeats maintained his cultural roots, featuring Irish legends and heroes in many of his poems and plays. As fellow poet W. H. Auden noted in a 1948 review essay entitled Yeats as an Example, Yeats accepted the modern necessity of having to make a lonely and deliberate choice of the principles and presuppositions in terms of which made sense of his experience. Auden assigned Yeats the high praise of having written some of the most beautiful poetry of modern times. 1885 was an important year in Yeats' early adult life, marking the first publication in the Dublin University Review of his poetry and the beginning of his important interest in occultism. It was also the year that he met John O'Leary, a famous patriot who had returned to Ireland after totaling 20 years of imprisonment for nationalistic activities. O'Leary had a keen enthusiasm for Irish books, music, and ballads, and he encouraged young writers to adopt Irish subjects. You could say O'Leary sparked his interest in Irish subjects. Yeats was compelled to accompany his family in moving to London at the age of 1886. There he continued to devote himself to Irish subjects, writing poems, plays, novels, and short stories, all with Irish characters and scenes. However, the most important event in Yeats' life during these London years was his acquaintance with Maud Gonne, a beautiful young woman passionately devoted to Irish nationalism. Yeats soon fell in love with Gonne, and for nearly 3 decades he pursued her. They bonded over their love for the Irish subject in poetry. Most of Yeats' poetry, however, used symbols from ordinary life and from familiar traditions. During the 1890s, he became increasingly interested in poetic techniques. He befriended English decadent poet Lionel Johnson, and in 1890 they helped found the Rhymers Club, a group of London poets who met to read and discuss their poems. The turn of the century marked Yeats' increased interest in theater, an interest influenced by his father. During the entire first decade of the 20th century, Yeats was extremely active in management of the Abbey Theatre Company, choosing plays, hiring and firing actors and managers, and arranging tours for the company. Eventually, however, Yeats began experiment as a playwright. While Yeats fulfilled his duties as president of the Abbey Theatre Group for the first 15 years of the 20th century, his nationalistic fervor, however, was less evident. Maud Gonne, with whom he had shared his Irish enthusiasms, had moved to Paris with her husband, and the author was left without her important encouragement. In 1916, however, he once again became a staunch exponent of the nationalist cause inspired by the Easter Rising. Yeats eventually made the decision to reside in Ireland rather than England, and his marriage to Georgie Hyde Lees in 1917 further strengthened that resolve. Yeats continued to explore mysticism. Only 4 days after his wedding, his bride began what would be a lengthy experiment with a psychic phenomenon called automatic writing, in which her hand and pen presumably served as unconscious instruments for the spirit world to send information. Yeats and his wife held more than 400 sessions of automatic writing, producing nearly 4,000 pages that Yeats avidly and patiently studied and organized. From these sessions, Yeats formulated theories about life and history. He believed that certain patterns existed, the most important being what he called gyres, interpreting cones representing mixtures of opposites of both a personal and historical nature. Another important element of poems in both these collections and other volumes is Yeats' keen awareness of old age. As Yeats aged, he saw Ireland changed in ways that angered him, and he offsets his frequently brazen manner with the personal conflicts expressed in his last poems. Throughout his last years, Yeats' creative imagination remained very much to his own, isolated to a remarkable degree from the successive fashions of modern poetry, despite his extensive contact with other poets. Yeats wanted poetry to engage full complexity of life, but only insofar as the individual poet's imagination had direct access to the experience or thought, and only insofar as those materials were transformed by the energy of artistic articulation. He was from first to last a poet who tried to transform the local concerns of his own life by embodying them in the resonantly universal language of his poems. His brilliant rhetorical accomplishments, strengthened by his considerable powers of rhythm and poetic phrase, have earned wide praise. it is not likely that time will diminish his great achievements.